And we're live. What's up, everybody? We are meant to have Mohammed on today. Still waiting for him. I spoke to him 2 hours ago. He confirmed that he will be making it. So, unless he had a random drop of internet, he should be here any moment. Oh, hold on. Doing this for years, still making those little feedback mistakes. But hey, no one's perfect. Before we get started, just a quick shout out to our Patreon visionary members. We have Renee Gordon, Adam Bosbecker, Neve Goldstein, David Edwards, and thank you to all our supporters, whether you're a visionary member or any type of supporter. Um, for those who want to support the show, in the description, you could find ways in how to do that. Really, the vision here, I'd like to get to the point where I could hire someone full time to really work on this channel. And we do have volunteers helping already, and they do a tremendous job. But the concept is just so simple and powerful, just people coming together for conversations. With such a painful and contentious issue, uh, where it's rare to see respectful conversations between the opposing sides. I mean, you go to Twitter, it's a shit show. You look at news channels, they bring people on, it's people yelling at each other. So we really want to change that. We want to show that despite our differences, despite our disagreements, we could come and have a respectful conversation. And this really is the way forward. This is how we can reconcile between people in conflict. Our primary focus is Israel and Palestine, but the longer term vision for this channel is to really focus on all conflicts. We could do Russia, Ukraine, India, Pakistan. We could do Democrats, Republicans, woke, anti-woke, right? There's just so much division in this world and not nearly enough conversation about our differences. So that's the idea. I work full time. I'm building a company called Grateful Giraffes. It's a company and a community. I just don't have so much time to focus on YouTube as much as I love doing this. So the idea is, to really build up the Patreon, build up the supporters, and once we have enough support, we can hire someone full time. That's the goal. We're also trying to get some grants, right? Getting a grant would certainly help, but we're exploring all means to expand our operation, our reconciliation operation here. So that's what we're trying to do. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. Feel free to ask questions. We're still waiting for Mohammed. Hopefully it comes on. If not, I apologize. This would be the second time in a row we planned this and it didn't work out. I mean, the situation in Gaza right now is tragic, and there's just no guarantee he has internet. It's coming in and out. He's already lost some friends. It's tough. It's tough, and that's the thing. People from the outside, it's hard to comprehend how many people on the ground are affected by it. There's not a single Israeli or Palestinian who hasn't lost someone to this conflict, or multiple people to this conflict. When you view it from afar, again, I'm not saying you can't view it from afar and be empathetic to what's going on. Certainly people are, but it's hard to truly comprehend how painful this is for people who are living on the land. Cool. I see we have Connor Odell from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. We have Sarah, who is a member. Thank you for being a member, Sarah, from Bahrain. See, we have Sparklove, who I know is somewhere in California. Nirafe, who is in Israel. Good to see you all. Alon Tsal Sela, I imagine you're also in Israel. Good to see you. I'm going to give Mohammed a call. Let's see if we could reach him. David from New York. If he doesn't join, we will, I guess, just turn this into a call-in show. We could do Q&A, and I'll drop a link, and whoever wants to join can join for some conversations. Although the call-in shows are better when we promote them ahead of time, because some people really want to come on and they need time to prepare. Alone lives in France since you were 3. Okay, cool. It's cool that you still have that name in Hebrew. Doesn't look like he's answering. Hopefully he joins us at some point. I hate to advertise this stuff and then not pull through. So my sincerest apologies for whoever was excited to hear from him. Hopefully we still will hear from him. I'm not giving up hope yet. Yeah. You guys might notice I have some bags under my eyes. That's just I haven't been sleeping lately. It's maybe partially connected to the conflict, but just jet lag. I was just in Israel for 3 weeks and just working my ass off. So a lot going on. Still making an effort to be here, bring relatively good vibes. What do you guys say? You want to do a call-in show? Would you rather just do Q&A? Or should we go on Twitter and review cringe accounts and do debunkings? Oh, Jim Paul from Beirut. Cool. Cool to see some Lebanese followers. Nice. I'm going to drop a link if anyone wants to hop on. And if anybody has questions, Yoav saying call and show. Okay, well, I just dropped the link. Yeah, Alon, it's the same Mohammed who had a friend in Gaza that was on a month ago. You know what? Let's try to be spontaneous here. And Rami Aman is also Gazan. He's currently in Egypt, but he's always willing to hop on for a conversation. So let's call Rami real quick. This is like taking the back office operation to a live stream setting. Fun. Cool. I see Zahir. You say you want to dial in. Yeah, let's do it. No, Rami didn't answer. Zahir is a Palestinian friend who I actually met through Sulha. Zahir, I'm going to drop you a link right now. We haven't had you on in years. Long overdue. Cool. Zahir's joining in 2 minutes. So we will have a Palestinian voice today. And I must say, it's not just a Palestinian voice. It's a very sexy voice, which you'll hear soon. I'll send Rami the link just in case he can make it. Hey, brother. Want to join for the live stream? Yeah, I was saying the Zahir. Yep, he's back. The Zahir is back, right? We'll have him on in a moment. Yeah, so I want to... There's so much cringe on Twitter. I mean, let's... Danielle, wow. Good to see you in the comments. Danielle from Israel. I don't think I've seen you since your wedding. Good to see you here. Twitter, Elon Musk recently tweeted saying, I'm not going to call it X. That's just a dumb name. And here's the thing. I don't hate Elon Musk. I think he's a brilliant innovator and businessman. I think he's an average political and social commentator. That would be my analysis of him. But he made a tweet saying how like Twitter is the best source of information and community notes is revolutionary. I think there's something to that, right? Twitter is a great source of information. You could really discover what's going on very quickly by people on the ground. It kind of democratizes reporting. And community notes is a great concept. But I think if we want to look at really what's happening on Twitter, it is also the biggest source of misinformation. And to the point where the world right now is more misinformed because of Twitter's existence. So I don't even think we could say Twitter is a net positive for humanity in its current formation. And it's not like I even know exactly how to solve it. I think there's a great challenge, but you have accounts sharing blatant misinformation, and sometimes the community notes can take many hours to be put up. Sometimes they never get put up, but they're also not always believed. People are starting to say community notes are Zionist controlled. So, and even if you believe community notes, sometimes the damage is done. A large account that's spreading misinformation, and there's a lot of them, can really impact what people perceive to be true. And by the time the community note is up, the damage is done, and that misinformation is spreading like wildfire. Um, and so there's a challenge because on one hand, I certainly support the concept of free speech, and I think it's very dangerous when there's like a politicalization of these platforms and certain voices are able to speak, um, are able to speak while others aren't. But at the same time, I think there should be a more serious repercussion for two types of of content. One, content that fans the flames of hate, right? So there's some accounts that are really just spreading hate, and while that is free speech, this is a private company, so I think it's legitimate to have some law in place. And the other is just people spreading misinformation. Like a community note isn't enough. If you have a track record of spreading things that aren't true, then your account should be banned, you know? Um, it's just, you know, like free speech laws are important, but we're not talking about speaking in the town square. It's a private company, so we could, you know, create different laws, and I think different laws can really impact how much misinformation gets out, and you know, the positive impact Twitter can have on the world. So um, that's my view on it, and I hope to see it evolve in that direction. And there's these accounts on both sides. You know, there's these pro-Israel propagandists that, you know, are just spreading bullshit. Some of it is borderline hateful, others just, you know, Israel propaganda, and then you have, and the largest accounts are primarily the anti-Israel accounts like Syrian Girl, Jackson Hinkle, um, Jake Shields. Who else do we have? George Gage, is that his name? A big anti-Semite. And all these names, obviously, we'd be happy to have them on for a conversation, but they're not definitely not contributing to the world being a better place. Then you have like the pro-Israel accounts like Ellie David, who's just also just a propagandist at this point. What's funny about Ellie David, I discovered him through his like COVID hoax content. Like he's big that, you know, pandemic and governments like push the vaccine on us for all these reasons. And you know, I think that the official COVID narrative was flawed, and there was a misalignment of incentives between what was optimal for humans and what was perhaps optimal for government and for pharmaceutical companies. But he was a big conspiracy theorist when it came to COVID. And now, when it comes to Israel Palestine, everything Israel says he takes as a source of truth, which is interesting because Israel is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. So, you know, clearly he thought Israel was being deceptive or doing something wrong when it came to vaccinating their public. But when it comes to Israel Palestine, they're just a source of truth, and everything they say is by default you know, the truth. So it's interesting to see how somebody can have such a clear bias depending on what the issue is. Yeah, I'm seeing in the comments Hanyan Naftali. Yep, he's another propagandist, total goofball. Actually, somebody said that he hasn't tweeted in many weeks. I think after he had that little incident. Hold on, let's see. You know, after there was the hospital bombing that was contested, you know, they said Israel bombed a hospital, 500 were killed. Israel said that it was a misfired rocket. And then Israel put out information, and then the White House agreed with it. And then everyone said, oh, yeah, it ended up being a Hamas rocket. I'm actually not sure that's the case. It very well may have been an airstrike in the end. I saw multiple reports making like claims on each end. And interestingly, you know, when I said it's impossible to know really what happened, both Israelis and Palestinians got very mad at me for even questioning what they thought was an obvious truth. But after the hospital bombing, he tweeted saying Israel bombed a hospital, and that was used as proof that Israel actually did it. And somebody mentioned that he hasn't tweeted since then. So let's check. Yeah. Oh no, he posted 2 hours ago, and 3 hours ago, and 5 hours ago. Okay, never mind. Oh, but then did he take a break? No. Okay, I don't know. I saw somebody said he hasn't tweeted in weeks. Yeah, no, he's here doing his propaganda as Hananya will do. I've tried to have him on the show many times, but he's not. Not responsive. And, I don't even want to make it seem like anybody who denies to come on the show is scared of a conversation, because we're not that big of a channel yet. So some people just might not view it as as worth their time. So we could give people the benefit of the doubt for not wanting to come on yet. Somebody's asking how I feel about Israeli journalist Hen Mazik. So Hen's been on the show, but he, again, I would consider him also to be like a pro-Israel propagandist. There's And all these propagandists do say things that are true and sometimes say things that are smart, but I think it's a question of how many people are they convincing, right? So I think most activists are, yeah, Ari, you're asking if we're doing a call in. Yeah, we are. I'll drop a link. So most activists today in the social media sphere, I don't know how many minds they're actually changing. They tailor their content to kind of preach to the choir. They try to optimize for impressions and likes and shares. Um, Very few people are actually making an effort to reach across the aisle and reach people who you might disagree with. And if you're pro-Israel, but you want to reach people that are uh, pro-Palestine, you need to do two things. You need to call Israel out when it does something wrong. Like, don't be ashamed to do that. And then the pushback on that could be like, there's so much anti-Israel. Why would I want to contribute to that? Well, you contribute it for two reasons. One, to just have integrity and credibility, but also in doing so, it allows you to be part of what the narrative actually is. So when all the bad stuff about Israel is just said by people who actually are anti-Israel, they get to control the narrative. So it's important for us to speak. Zahir, I see you're in the waiting room. Just can you put a name up, because your name right now is, or is that some Arabic thing? I guess it is. Okay. Um, yeah, I'm gonna add some people on real quick. But so just on that point, so there's not much of an effort to reach across the aisle. It's more so people just preaching to the choir. So pro-Israel people should not only be not only call Israel out, they should also be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and that is their best way to actually convince Palestinians and their supporters of anything. Because someone like Chen Mazig, he has a lot of followers. Hanania has a lot of followers, but how many minds are they actually changing? Right? Even our platform here, with much less amount of followers than a lot of these big accounts, we are in all likelihood changing more minds because of the approach we take. So again, I think that's the more important metric to look at, and that's probably a reason why uh, we don't grow as fast. Also, because we don't do many shorts and like we don't do much viral content. But um, we're not trying to preach to the choir. We're not trying to give people information that will just support what they already believe. We're trying to give a different perspective, and that's less popular, but we will remain true to this mission. Cool. I'm gonna bring Zahir on for a few minutes, and then Paul and Ari, I see you guys. We'll bring you on in a few moments as well. Zahir, what's up, brother?
No, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear. How's it going?
I mean, about as well as it can be.
Right, all things considered. Yeah. Is your family okay?
I mean, no one's, they're alive. My family's in the West Bank, so there are people who are arrested, but otherwise
Mm.
alive. So, more friends in Gaza,
Yeah,
where my
I'm
mom.
sorry to hear that. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's like alive but not well, right? At least they're alive but not well. Um, what's the sentiment on the ground right now in the West Bank?
I mean, it's really bad. It's probably the worst it's ever been. The the tension is unbelievable. Like, people are afraid to travel between cities because of the stories of the violence at the checkpoints, the torture, beatings, etc. So yeah, that's really tense. There were a lot of arrests. So immediately after the 7th of October, there was an enormous number of raids, and then a lot of youth were arrested. Not like not necessarily for anything, just anybody who could kind of you know like people who are just involved at their university, school council type shit. And yeah, so there was immediately a whole bunch of arrests, and ever since then, the tension, settler violence, but particularly, and this is always the case with war. It was the same. It was the same in the Second Intifada, for example. The behavior of the soldiers always goes to its absolute lowest when
Right.
there's tension. So that's when there's like the most abuse of power. That's when there's the most, beating, sort of violence. People not breaking chain of command, etc. And there's been very much a it's mixed too. It's not just it's also sort of the PA suppressing protests and stuff. But yeah, there's been the maximal degree of I guess the attempt to instill fear so that the West Bank doesn't do anything. Which has what that looks like is what's played out over the course of the last month, and it feels odd talking about the West Bank given the fact that like if you in Gaza you have more deaths than the Nakba in the last month, which is hard to wrap your head around. And like if it wasn't for the fact that the border to Egypt is closed, it is by all means. I mean, despite what some Likudniks or right wing Knesset members would like to see, Gazans can't leave Gaza, nor I think do a lot of them want to, because it very much represents like a repeat of the Nakba. But just the number of people displaced from the north, like nearly 1 million people, very similar sort of numbers to the Nakba, and the number of deaths. This is the most violent event in the history of the conflict, in the history of the war, the 100-year war, so to speak, ever since the Nakba. So that's like, yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around. It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that we're witnessing it in our lifetime. Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think anybody has a grasp on the psychological impact. Like the way people are talking about the aftermath to me is delusional. That like, oh, we're going to rebuild it, and then or even the idea, like initially, the idea that maybe there could be like a unity government and the PLO could take over, that seems so unlikely now. Yeah, like the popular sentiment is, the legitimacy of the PA, which was already very, very low, is now non-existent. I don't know if the PA will like survive the war, honestly. Yeah, it has destabilized both the West Bank and Gaza in unprecedented ways. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's tragic. It's hard to see, and I think you make a great point about the psychological impact. I think it's something that is often not stated enough. It's how these conflicts, how much trauma they cause, and how that just further radicalizes our populations. It's unclear what the path forward here is. I know you and I are both in agreement that if we could wish for anything, it's a change in the status quo, but hopefully, changing the status quo isn't necessarily better, right? Like, let's really hope that it's a positive change in the status quo.
I'm really struggling to see how that happens now. Like in the beginning, when it was sort of unclear how this would play out, there was like, okay, maybe this could result in, the upside to, the tremendous and tragic loss of life could be a change in the status quo. I'm really struggling to see a pathway there now. Like, look, the radicalization always happens during war anyway, so it's hard to say where it will land afterwards. But like, yeah, this is unprecedented. It's unprecedented even in military doctrine. Like in even the behavior of the Israeli army is different to how it has been pretty much ever, even in past wars in Gaza. I think part of that is that the preparation for the ground operation involved like reshaping the landscape militarily so that it was more suitable for the incursion to occur, which has meant an unprecedented scale of destruction. I think an unprecedented lack of restraint, an unprecedented lack of everything from what I think is already a fairly low bar compared to like the reasonable commander test that let's say the United States would do with some of its stuff. And I think that's just kind of part of the warfare, the nature of the warfare that Israel conducts. Like, let's say since the Lebanon war, which often has an element of, okay, well, we're up against a insurgency or militant group, and therefore we have to use different tactics to what you'd normally use in warfare. But ultimately, like from that fairly low or fairly asymmetric warfare bar, this is even worse. So yeah, and what that has resulted in is a, I don't know, it's like set us back a half century. Like yeah. Now again, I don't know where it will land. There's a number of aspects to this. Like, I don't see the off ramp politically internally in Israel. I don't see the off ramp for Netanyahu's government, for this war cabinet. If you look back at 2014, the beginning of a truce is usually a pathway to a permanent ceasefire. So like my reading of how it usually plays out is there's a series of ceasefires, followed by a gradual withdrawal after some symbolic outcome. So Israel would like kill a commander, or some high level member in Gaza, and then they would begin to withdraw slowly. So the number of airstrikes would decrease. They would sort of pull out bit by bit. That's usually how it plays out. But looking at the media landscape, I don't see how that's going to happen. I don't really see like a political off ramp for this turning into a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, given that there won't be a change in the status quo, like at all. Like this, when Israel pulls out, it will be Hamas that's running Gaza, and I don't really see how it cannot be. Like, you could have probably in the beginning. So there's talk. I don't know if this is valid, but what I've read in is that the Hussein al-Sheikh, or like the PLO, has tried to meet with Ismail Haniyeh and have been told to piss off, basically. So the likelihood of like the only thing that I think people would have accepted on the ground is a coalition government. The idea that Hamas were going to be removed politically entirely in Gaza is not viable on the ground. And like diehard, lifelong Fatah supporters are now, have flipped after this war. So there is so little popular support for, an external government being imposed on Gaza. Historically, it's like militarily unfeasible. Like, you're just going to be fighting an insurgency for years until you say fuck this, and then you pull out. Like, this is Afghanistan. Right. There's a million wars that Iraq. It's the same thing. Only now you will have destabilized the region further. A population that, because the way everyone talks about Gaza is in tropes. Like, we're used to all the usual, like, it's an open air prison and it's a concentration camp and these people are suffering, the poverty rate and all that. And that's good and valid and worthwhile, but it doesn't really. It also to an extent dehumanizes Gazans who have a very high literacy rate, or a highly educated population. The literacy rate is higher than countries for the youth is higher than countries like Greece and Portugal. So you're not dealing with this like, this. Like there's an actual civilization there. You've got research labs and you've got a fairly educated population that has no pathway forwards. But you have universities and you have doctors and you have civil society. It's not what it would be if there was no blockade. It's not what it would be if there wasn't a glass ceiling on any economic opportunity. But not a glass ceiling. There wasn't a ceiling on any economic opportunity. But it's there, and however this plays out, this sets all of that back. Like, this is now a much harder place to govern. There's going to be a much harder place to heal. The hatred, the very understandable hatred, is going to be there for a long time, and I don't see a political off-ramp on the Israeli side. I don't see a political off-ramp on the Palestinian side. Yeah, I'm really struggling to see how this ends, other than in some kind of a stalemate.
Yeah, real quick, I'll share some thoughts on that. Thanks for that analysis. Paul, I'm going to bring you on, so just get your camera on or put a thumbnail. And Ali, also, if you want to join, either camera on or thumbnail. Awesome. Hold on. We have both Ali and Paul on. Cameras on or
Hey.
thumbnail, please. Hey, I'm just
Oh,
going to share some thoughts, and then I'm happy to give you the floor, Ali.
how do I get a thumbnail?
Yeah, Zahira, I mean, you make great points about what good can actually come of this. And if you look at the sentiment in Israel, like they say, Hamas has got to go. We're going to defeat them. That they genuinely believe that the operation won't end until there is no more Hamas, and that is what our politicians are currently saying. I think if it was defeating Hamas was easy, I think it would have been done long ago. And I don't know, I don't even know if it's possible or how many years it would take. The thing that gives me any amount of confidence that would actually be achieved is that this is the only way Bibi can save his reputation. Because and if some good comes out of this, it's that Bibi will be gone. 75% of Israelis don't think he's fit to serve, but he's not going to go down without a fight. So in his mind, the only way to save his legacy and potentially allow him to stay in power is by Hamas being defeated. So I think he's going to try his very best to actually accomplish
Did you see
that.
the Times of Israel article about him telling other Likud MKs that he's not going anywhere, basically?
Yeah, he's all exactly, and what and this was so predictable, just knowing him and his character. Like it seems like the head of the Shabak, the head of the Minister of Defense, and the head of the IDF. I think it's thought that they are all going to step down once this is over, but I think he's just going to keep fighting. He's not one to just go down, but the only way that it seems like he won't be pushed out politically, right? Because again, 75% think he's unfit to serve, and if you look at recent polling, the Likud has like 15 mandates. Benny Gantz has 40, right? So it looks like he's most likely to be Israel's next prime minister, and he's not some like revolutionary peacemaker, but he's definitely more of a centrist, less of a narcissist, more reasonable than Bibi. So that's something that could give us hope. And also, only around 20 to 30% of Israelis, I saw two different polls, think that we should be building settlements in Gaza. So I think there's this narrative that we're going to build settlements, and those who left North Gaza won't be allowed to return. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think if Bibi was still in power, maybe that 20 to 30% would have enough political power to allow it to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. But again, I agree that I don't think there's a clear, there's a clear vision for what needs to happen there, or how we could end this horrific time in a better state than we were prior to it.
Would
I
there
do want
be
to get
fear? Would there be fear to move to Gaza for anybody? Like, say they made settlements in Gaza.
wait,
But
Ali, real
people,
quick, just because Paul's been waiting a fair
sorry.
bit longer. Paul, I just want to give you the
Hi to
opportunity.
everybody at the same time.
Hi, can you hear me?
You're going to speak a little bit louder.
Okay, one second. I'm gonna try to fix this.
Okay. Yeah, Ali, what's on your mind? And Connor, I'm bringing you on as well. What's up,
Hey,
Connor?
thank you very much for having me. I hope you guys are doing well. Adar, I've been binging your stuff recently, and I really love your material, Sulha. I think
Thank you. I
there's a verse in
appreciate
the
that.
Quran that talks about it, and I really like your forward thinking and the people that you have on. So, this issue, I guess I grew up in it. I'm Muslim, so like Israel Palestine's always in the back of our minds. Every little bit, there's always a conversation every 3 years or 2 years. We don't live there, but somehow, like, I don't, for some reason, we have feelings towards the whole area, and this is the first year that I've got to understand the Israeli side. Because normally I only hear my side, which is the Palestinian side, the ones that I have an affinity towards. And over time, because of your program, I'm beginning to see, behind the curtain, being like, oh, this is actually a lot more going on here than, I initially thought. So
I appreciate that. I really enjoy getting that feedback, because that's why we do what we do. So thank you.
Yeah. And the proof that you guys are very diverse. You and there's someone, Corey, this Canadian guy that goes around asking questions. I feel like you guys
Corey
have done a
does
lot.
too.
Yeah, he's amazing. I feel like you guys have done a lot to like show different sides. So I've been binging you guys' stuff, and it's been a
He's actually been on the show actually. Corey's great. His channel's awesome. Such a simple concept that just teaches you so much about the other people. Really humanizes the other side. So yeah, I was just in Israel. And I met up with him.
The Ask Project.
The Ask Project, exactly.
Corey Gilschuster.
Here. There we are.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, he's lost weight.
Stressful times.
Oh man, sorry.
No. I think he's actively trying. So yeah. He's doing well.
Because I used to watch him a long time ago. It's one of those things I see like in my Ask feeds on YouTube, like on the side feeds. Every now and then I'm like, all right, what's going on here?
Ali, what's your like ethnic background, if you don't mind me asking?
Kenyan. I'm like Kenya. My dad grew up in Kenya, but we're ethnically Somali.
Ah, okay, cool, awesome. Got some nice diversity here.
Skawaran.
Fian. I don't really speak well.
I'm not Somali. I have some Somali friends.
That's where are you from?
I'm from the West Bank.
Oh, okay, yeah.
grew up
The
there.
pineapple gives it away. Sorry, I didn't
It's a
catch the
watermelon.
beginning. Yeah, the watermelon revolution.
To what you were saying before, Adar, like with regards to Israeli society perceiving that there's no sort of outcome here except the downfall of basically regime change. Like that's the part to me that's like the most disconnected from reality, I guess. Like I don't know what they're envisioning that looks like. I don't really see a version of events where that can occur. Particularly as the war's unfolded. So there's a breakdown in civil society. There's a breakdown in Hamas's civil control over Gaza. There's been no meaningful breakdown, as far as what I'm hearing on the ground, in their ability to fight, at least fight a indefinite insurgency. And I'm not even sure how you would achieve that without basically a very, very long-term occupation. Like that, there's no. I mean, we can just look at any other war where something has played out like this. In the very early days of this, that I could have seen a diplomatic outcome where the only person who can go in Gaza is, it's either a very, very long occupation that I don't think, frankly, Israel can sustain while it's also occupying the West Bank, or it's a government that the people in Gaza are at worst ambivalent to, where they're like, okay, yeah, we're kind of okay with this. And if you look at polling after the attack and sort of sentiment on the ground, there's no version of this where that doesn't have some form of Hamas as a political faction. Like there's no version of this where they're going to be erased, and if anything, they are now wildly more popular in the West Bank, like the most popular they've ever been. In the entire time like since I was born. The West Bank is very averse to a lot of aspects of Hamas as a ideology, specifically sort of as an Islamist movement. Not that there aren't areas that do support that, but like that's a very small tent, while Fatah has big tent. And I'm talking classical Fatah, like pre Mahmoud Abbas, but classical Fatah has big tent and can generally galvanize the majority of the population. The simplest example of this is, if you take someone like Marwan, he wins like in a landslide. Marwan al-Barghouthi, he wins in a landslide in any Palestinian election. The war and Israel's response has resulted in overwhelming popular support for Hamas, particularly in the West Bank, where at least in Gaza there's mixed feelings about what this has done, but it's still not seen a decrease in support in a meaningful way. Where prior to the war there was very little support for another war, for another attack. It's funny seeing the polling on like days before the attack, where like overwhelmingly people wanted to focus on improving material conditions in Gaza rather than another war. But that has everything has shifted now, and any outcome where there is a government that the local population is not at worst ambivalent to, it equals an insurgency that will just run for a very, very long time until whatever the occupying powers or whatever that regime is decides to either pull out or is replaced by something else. So that's kind of my concern there. And then the flip side is the only change to the status quo politically that I can see is in some kind of a prisoner swap that releases, significant political figures. So the only thing that I can sort of see changing the game politically is if there is a prisoner swap that releases figures like Marwan al-Barghouthi, Abdullah al-Barghouthi, Ahmed Sadat, etc. That could change Palestinian politics in a way that someone else could govern, or someone else would have enough support to govern. But I don't know what your thoughts are on like how open Israeli society would be to that kind of a prisoner swap.
I'm not too sure. I do think Israelis are, for the first time in their lives, fed up with the status quo, and I think now would be a chance to try something bold. I think a lot of it comes down to good leadership, right? If a leader makes a good case for releasing someone out of prison because they could, unify Palestinians, but in a way that isn't harmful for Israelis, not many Israelis would buy it. I think there's a lot of, pain and trauma now, but I think we do need a leader that's going to make these bold moves. And is Benny Gantz that leader? Probably not, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I'm not sure. I do want to give the floor to some others. Paul, Amir, I'm going to bring you on. Oh, and Paul.
Can you? Is my voice clear? Can you hear me?
It is, but we're getting like a lot of static on your end.
Oh, okay. What about now?
And guys, I see we actually have Mohammed. Guys, Mohammed made it. So, Mohammed, thanks for joining. We're going to bring you on in a few minutes. If you could give yourself a thumbnail like last time, it would be appreciative. Paul, what's going on?
So I just have a question.
It's real choppy on your end. You're frozen now.
Oh, sorry. I think it should be fine now. So I'm just wondering about the people. I know that there were like about 20,000 persons from Gaza working in Israel before the war, and I know that Israel was providing electricity to Gaza, and I'm guessing this is going to stop in the future. They're not going to have anyone from Gaza working in Israel anymore, and it's always unfortunate when you have these little Palestinian and Israelis that are interrupted. I think it's very important for people to interact at a really basic level and to work together and do things like this. This is why I think that this channel is important.
Yeah, I mean, you pose a good question. What will that look like in the future? And this is what many Israelis are. One of the reasons why Israelis have lost hope. It's because the past 2 years we've had relative quiet with Hamas, and Israel's done what they view as like a good faith measure that 15, 20,000 Palestinians, Gazans were entering every day into Israel to work. And, this is on one hand, you could view it as cheap labor for Israel, which is true, but it's also a way to strengthen the Palestinian economy. And it's also just a way to connect between more people, right? Most Israelis don't know any Gazans, and this is an opportunity. But what happened, at least this is what was said to have happened. When Hamas attacked a lot of the kibbutzim, they knew where everything was. What they think happened was some of the Gazans that were working in the kibbutzim, they relayed information to Hamas about where the guard tower is, how to get in, where these buildings are, where the shelters are, and all that. So there was some betrayal. Now, you like who knows? That could be 3 people amongst 15,000, right? It's possible most didn't want that to happen because their livelihoods are now destroyed and potentially their homes are destroyed and they've lost loved ones, right? But
usually it's the case that it's a minority that.
Right, but yeah, that's what's unfortunate because all it does is take a few and then it's kind of attributed to the whole, right? So it's unfortunate. I mean, I hope we get back to the point where Gazans can enter Israel to work and, and even down the line where Israelis can go into Gaza. My dad used to go on vacation there. So, yeah. Guys, I know there's people who haven't spoken, but I do want to bring Mohammed on just because that was the whole intention here. Unless this is a different Mohammed, you just really can't know. Many people know that Mohammed is the most popular boy's name in the world, but many don't know that the ratio of boys and men named Mohammed amongst Palestinians is higher than any other Middle Eastern. You could fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I have a different friend named Mohammed, and he made a joke that out of 13 boys in his class, 8 of them were Mohammed. So
I think every Bangladeshi's middle name is Mohammed.
I
think Bangladesh might have the record though.
Okay, yeah, we could ask ChatGPT. They should be able to give us this one. Mohammed, what's up? Can you hear us? You're live.
Yes, I hear you.
Cool. It's good to have you on. I'm glad you were able to connect.
Yes, it was hard to me. I think there is a ban on Gaza because the link didn't work, but now it's working with VPN.
Okay, yeah. So the link so just so everyone has some context, the link to join the stream wasn't working. He was able to communicate with me via
the last time was working good, but today is not working.
Yeah, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like there's some sites in Gaza that are censored. Why would StreamYard be censored though? I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty innocent. But what's how are you doing, man?
I'm good. Just a little sick. Some flu.
Did you say
Is
wait
there
a second?
flu going through? Is there flu going through the people right now because of conditions?
Yes.
Oh, you're sick. Oh, I meant sorry.
Is it because of the water quality?
Maybe the weather. Just
the weather. Okay.
It's very cold.
The
weather, yes.
And we keep our windows open because the air short or something like this to avoid destroying the windows because all windows here are glasses.
Yeah, I'll make it easy for you.
What part of Gaza are you in, Mohammed?
I'm in the south. Khan Yunis, exactly.
That's where you've lived the whole time,
Yes.
right? You didn't, yeah.
Yes.
So has your neighborhood been affected at all?
Yes. We have many houses here. Good air shot. All families were killed here.
What do you think of the idea that the South is different to the North? So all my friends who I know in Gaza speak about in terms of the landscape for war. So they talk about how it is much more difficult for the tanks, for the army to the roads are much thinner. It's going to be much harder for them to maneuver there. And in the North, they avoided places like Shaja'iyya and certain areas. So do you think that's true? Do you think that if the war was to continue into the South, it would play out differently, or not? In Khan Yunis or in the South in general?
I think it's hard for tanks to enter Khan Yunis because it's open area. the houses here maybe not close together as Gaza. The capacity in Gaza is very, 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 very big. It's hard for tanks to go through Khan. They tried many times to enter Khan Yunis, but it was hard. But in Gaza, maybe because the building, they can go through between the houses or the buildings. Maybe this.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well.
Mhm.
And then like this, the same thing in the north, where there's certain areas that have been avoided, and so there also that it would be difficult for them to come in by sea, while they could in Gaza City and places in the north.
Mhm. Maybe the from the sea, the same. There's the Charter camp. It filled with people. The capacity is very high there. It's easy for tanks to go.
Mohammed,
But only time maybe they allow the tanks to enter into the city, and then make something like in Arabic it's kamin, as something like get in the inside, many tanks inside, and then attack it.
guys, we're going to let all the panelists ask Mohammed questions. So if you have questions, start thinking what you want to ask. Mohammed, what is the sentiment on the ground in Gaza? I mean, I'm sure it's very, very challenging days, and I saw a number that like 0.5% of the Gazan population has been killed, which is hard to comprehend. What are people saying? Is it doom and gloom? Is there some amount of hope at a better future? What are people talking about?
Still talking about the life and better life. They feel like something cure on us, but we don't it. We don't. Many more people don't blame Hamas, but they blame Israel. The reflection of Israel of what happened. Maybe it was very easy to solve it. Maybe can make something about hostages replacement. Maybe this is the solution. What was expected from Hamas and from the people, but the destruction and killing much people, it's very hard on us. Very hard to see your child killed in front of your eyes. Many videos show parents lost their children and their wives. Our next house, all family died except the mother. Last day, yesterday, the mother was there died, has been died because it was some injuries. I think she couldn't believe what happened to her family. They didn't share in war or something like this. All of them were at house. The trauma for the children, for women. The life here is very, very, very hard. People not their houses. All people, or most of people in schools, sharing classrooms to live in it. Divided into men or male and female. It's very, 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 very hard. There is no water, there is no food, there is no products to buy. Maybe now we have much money with people, but not all people. But most people have money, but they can't buy anything. There is no power. I talk with you because I have solar panels at my house, but most of people didn't have. We have just electricity. Okay, it's 8 hours per day. They charge battery, but now they can't charge their batteries. So most people don't have electricity. Maybe I can use my laptop and can make something. I can talk with you. I have some internet. They don't have internet 24 hours. They stop the internet from about now or something like 11, 12 until next day, 4 afternoon, because they want to charge batteries and to provide internet for us.
Is this on a regular basis or specifically specifically
It's now, just now.
Okay. So
Okay,
there's like some
before we have internet 24 hours, electricity 8 hours cut, 8 hours on. Fuel, it was expensive, but exists. But now, no, the situation is very hard.
We're very sorry to hear that, and we very much appreciate you coming on to share this. The world is thinking about you and caring for you. And I know this might not make much of a material difference, but there definitely is a lot of concern for the people in Gaza right now. Do any of our panelists have a question for Mohammed?
I've got a bunch, but I can let others answer first.
Let's give Nir the opportunity to share and ask, and then we could take it back to you, Zahir.
I don't think I have much to say to Mohammed other than I feel your pain, brother. Even though I'm here in Israel, I feel your pain. I don't know.
Thank you for that.
What can I say? I wish someday, I don't know when, someday, let's have hummus together. Instead of weapons, let's eat hummus.
Today I found hummus in Khan Yunis. I was very happy for that.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Some good taste in your mouth, I'm sure.
We don't pain for anyone, for any people. We just think about peace, about building our countries. We think about to be one country, not two countries, because we believe in living together with a good situation. But this is a problem. Every solutions provided to us didn't make it better. This is, the situation in Gaza before the war. It won't be okay in the war. Is very worse, very, very, very bad situation, very hard situation. But before the war, it was not good. So the people here maybe sometimes you want something strong to make change.
Do you think, maybe I do have a question. Do you think that if it wasn't Hamas in charge, then things would have been better or worse?
What do you mean exactly in charge?
If they were not the governing power in Gaza?
Do you think I asked this question for many people here. They told me if we don't have Hamas or resistance, what will happen to us? Maybe they think Hamas will protect us from something you can call it criminal, not just attack or defense. This is a problem. So people here, okay, they don't like or don't like the government of Hamas, but they think the resistance is something shield to protect us. So if you want to make peace or talk about something better, you have to include the resistance in it, not just political people or something like people just want to make it's easy to make peace, but without resistance, it's very hard. I know the ideology of resistance is uh, resolve, as you think, resolve Israel or release Al-Aqsa Mosque or something like this. But we have common area of thinking of make the next years better and peaceful for all people. Okay, the release is a dream for our people or our side of this conflict, but we still looking for peace. I said this so some agent in intelligence. We believe in Israel. Maybe sometime will not exist. This is our belief in our country. But we want peace in the rest of the years of Israel. We want it to make better. You know, in Quran, I reviewed the chapter 17 about Israel. You know, this surah called Al-Isra, sometimes called Israel. It talk about the existing of Israel or the what Israel become in the top of the nations and make something good. In the Quran, Allah promised Israel, if you be good, it will be good for you. If you not, it for you. This is the message of Allah in our Quran. This is what we are looking for. This is our message to Israel, to be good. Killing or attacking or something like this, maybe it's very hard. Okay, maybe it's hard to get to see your people kidnapped and getting in Gaza. You know, as you see, they were protected. They were the thing of resistance was about just make replacement of prisoners of war prisoners. Not the war, not all of this. Maybe the killing. Uh, you know, in our religion, there it's forbidden to kill child, to kill women, to kill rabbi, as you call. Uh, Maybe it's okay for fighting, for soldiers, for something like this. But I know I have many soldiers, are friends from Israel. Some of them were in Zikim, near of Gaza. I see him as not a soldier, just a soldier. He is a good people. He is a good man. So I think we need to think different, to think as Adar thinking about peaceful, about stop fighting. Still, this is our message. Stop fighting. Let's talk. Let's talk seriously. Talking with people, with the decision makers in Israel, thinking about the good for all, thinking care about Israelis and Palestinians, caring uh, about the back the hostages in Gaza. You know, there were hostages. There were many hostages in Gaza, but they attacked places they were in it. It's very hard. It's very bad for all. This is what I want to talk about, and still thinking about making some economy share economy and making something good. Thinking about high tech oasis in the Negev. I still think about making something peaceful. If we still working on economic projects, and as Obama tried to make before that, while he was president of USA, making something common, something make us talking to each other, to face each other. Let's our tongues talk, not our guns. Uh, Maybe some projects. This is there is Adar. He's not just a friend. Maybe he's a close friend for me. He's US. He is in Tel Aviv, but I respect him. I care about him. What about make this is the next stories, not war stories, not killing stories. I know it's very hard here to people. Maybe you think it's hard to people to accept this talk. Instead of that, no, we still think about peace. People here lost their children, but they don't want to lose the others. They still want to live in peace. Okay, maybe revenge is exist now, but maybe they're still working on something peaceful, something good. We can destroy or calm this revenge.
Zahir, do you wanna ask
Just
a
to what,
question?
just to what to Nir's question about like what and to what Mohammed said as a response. In the West Bank, there's an idea whenever we talk about the Sulta, the Palestinian Authority, which is that they can't protect us, right? So if a settler is going to attack a Palestinian in the West Bank, the PA can't do anything. They have no ability to protect Palestinians. So there's a general mindset in Palestinian society that Israelis, and it doesn't matter how aware, they don't have to be that aware of Israeli, the internal factions of Israeli society to be able to distinguish between them. Either, most Israelis, or even if it's just some Israelis, that given total free reign, there's a belief, and this is based off their experiences with the settlers they deal with, etc., that they would basically be ethnically cleansed. So the perspective is that in Gaza, the only thing that protects Palestinians is the fact that there is a resistance. That if there wasn't one, the Israeli army would come in, and in a situation like this, Gaza would be wiped out. Now, it doesn't matter whether you think that's true. That is the belief that's held. Is everyone looks at the West Bank and they say, "Look at the West Bank. The West Bank gave up armed resistance, and the West Bank is worse off than it was prior." You had governments like Salim Fayyad in the West Bank, who is everything Israelis talk about wanting Palestinians to do. Salim Fayyad cracked down on all militant factions. He basically gave up everything Palestinians think about when they think about the Palestinian cause. Everything from right of return to even 67 borders. He was willing to compromise tremendously on. He was entirely focused on improving the Palestinian economy and civil institutions, and he cracked down on all resistance in the West Bank, and that didn't result in any change. The Mahmoud Abbas government's been there for a very long time now, and they are absolutely committed to to security coordination, and it fluctuates from time to time, but ultimately they clearly play a role of limiting Palestinian resistance. And again, that hasn't seen them be able to change things in the West Bank. If anything, they're actually cut out of the conversation. And like whenever Bibi's government would cut out the Palestinian Authority and the PLO and deal directly with Hamas. And so over time, the ultimate argument for Hamas any day of the week is just look at the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority has no ability to protect its citizens. At least in Gaza, when we are attacked, we can fight back. Maybe we don't win, but we can at least fight back. And the political leaders like Ismail Haniyeh and Khalid Mishal, they're not very popular, but military leaders are popular. And I think Israelis
Mm-hmm.
Israelis don't perceive Israelis' perception of what do you call it? How Palestinians perceive the attacks, for example, is very different to what we saw in our media, which was like a fixation on the military targets, a fixation on the Qassam fighters talking about how they didn't attack women and children, etc. Like these two societies exist in totally different media bubbles, and so what people perceive is completely different on the Palestinian side to what's perceived on the Israeli side. But big picture, yeah, everyone just sees, so long as the Fatah, current Fatah or the PLO approach doesn't result in any material outcome, that is always going to be the ultimate argument for Hamas.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, just real
Yeah.
quick. It's interesting, Zahir, you do make a good point that, what is the result of engaging in nonviolence, and it's not like there's been progress. But the counter to that would be it's still the quality of life in the West Bank is still significantly better than in Gaza, and that's because the leadership there is less of a threat. So I think it goes both ways. I think a more important question is, clearly violence just leads to more violence, right? Like so much of what Israel's security apparatus and support for the security apparatus, even with all its successes, a lot of this is justified by the Israeli public as necessary for security. And we see it's like Hamas might be more popular in the West Bank now, but I mean, just the devastation in Gaza, clearly it wasn't. It's clearly not a successful. October 7th is not a success for Hamas. It's a loss for all of us. But I think the more important question is, what is effective means of resistance Palestinians can take? And I don't think there's any clear answer. And I think this is what drives Palestinians towards violence, because when you get desperate and you don't see any way forward, often violence seems to be the only option. So I'm not saying there's a clear path forward.
I think there are other options, but
yeah.
Like,
I think that's really the interesting question, right? What is a form of Palestinian resistance that isn't seen by Israelis as a threat to their survival, and that will actually, progress their cause of sovereignty over some amount of the land? And I think a lot of it comes down to having different expectations, right? I think as long as the resistance, even if it's nonviolent resistance, even if the attempt is to dismantle Israel, it's just a non-starter for Israelis. Like Israelis don't see any vision where they could live on the land without a Jewish state protecting them, and them remaining safe. And it would take generations for Israelis to feel comfortable with such a situation. So it's almost like the focus should be not on dismantling Israel, but should be on statehood, on sovereignty over some part of the land. And then after that, after we have peace, maybe it could be work like the activism could be focused on access to more parts of the land. Palestinian citizens of Israel can work towards improving like some systemic issues, right? I think this is the way to look at it that I think will be more effective. And we just need to understand that a nation born on the concept of never again is not going to respond well to violence. It's not, when we feel like our back is up against the wall, that's when we become radicalized and act violently. And same with Palestinians, right? A lot of what they're doing is because they feel like they have no other option. So I want us I want to put it out there and for us to think of other ways to go about this.
So would you agree that I think the only thing Israelis and Palestinians agree on right now is that they hate peace activists. That it's very it is the least popular thing to be. You're a traitor to if you're, and I think there's a reason for that. On the Palestinian side, the word peace is meaningless. It's like everybody wants peace. I want peace. You want peace. I think Ben Gvir wants peace. And Sinwar wants peace. It's just they want peace under their conditions. So the better question is, what are the requirements? Like what is it that you actually want? And the problem is, I don't think I genuinely, I think that's what the conversation should be about. And I think peace activism hasn't done a very good job, probably because of the kind of people who are involved in it, of actually communicating without sugarcoating what do people actually think and what do they actually believe, and what do they want. Like, you know, Palestinians obviously want to dismantle Israel. Like that's like an obvious statement. But then the question has to be, well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean, what, like, why do they want to do that? And it's not just about the cycle of violence, but it's also like, what aspects of it do they want to dismantle? It's not about killing Israeli civilians. There's so lots of people who want revenge. There's obviously hatred on both sides, but that is not the deep-rooted ideology. It's about returning to the land. It's about just like freedom. It's about rights, and it is actually less about sovereignty than it is on the Israeli side. If anything, on the Israeli side, there is a long-standing ideology of wanting, Jewish self-determination. This idea of like that this is the only way we'll be safe is if we, if we are the majority here, we're guiding, we're plotting out our own destiny, etc. That idea isn't present on the Palestinian side. Instead, we look back at our ideal, and again, it doesn't really matter whether you agree this is true. It matters more to understand what people actually believe. Our ideal is we look back at like pre-Nakba society. We look really even further back. Like we see the ideal as this like Ottoman era pluralistic, world where Muslims, Christians, and Jews live together, and then it's like the story of Avatar, and then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Like that is the narrative that Palestinians have. And that is idealism, and you can say, well, that wouldn't work, blah blah blah, but that's how they perceive it. And so that is a starting point for a conversation where I don't think a lot of people know that Islamic Jihad has that the leader of Islamic Jihad has actually made that same statement, or one of the founders. Sorry, not one. I don't know if they still hold that view that they did in the early days, but yeah, they still have this like ideology of, well, if Israelis just wanted to live, with us normally, then we could have a conversation, but they don't. Therefore, there's no point having a conversation. We must go to war.
Right.
Like as soon as you can paint people's outcomes as not zero sum, that like there's a version of this where I can get what I want, and it's not zero sum with what you want. That's when the dialogue starts being productive, because we're actually being honestly talking about like the same thing. Now, in the short term, everyone's more concerned with just reducing the immediate suffering that is happening. But like long term, that is what it's about. Is you have two wildly divergent narratives that don't ever speak in a meaningful way, and there's no like honest conversation about what is a non-zero sum version of this. Yeah.
And they also, like you mentioned, they don't see the same reality, and they don't see the same things in their mainstream media. I mean, you just mentioned that what Palestinians saw on the 7th of October is an attack on military targets or something like that. Well, what we saw are houses of people being burned down and children dying. So this is different, and we don't see. If I'll go to channel 12 news or 13 or whatever, we will see houses in Gaza down to the ground, but we rarely see images of. We see none, basically, images of people suffering. The only time we see people if there's a mob going after the hostages or something like that. So we are in a way being radicalized, and we need to fight it, because at the end of the day, if we will be radicalized, we will never reach some place in the middle. And there is a way to reach some place in the middle, I believe, because I believe when we go down to it, we will realize that Israelis want one thing, Palestinian want another thing, and it doesn't necessarily contradict. We just need to figure out a way to reach it. But again, this cannot happen under radicalization. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that the political frameworks are that hard. Like, you could design a dozen political frameworks tomorrow that, if you could change how people perceived each other, would work. You know, it could be whether it's like, yeah, there's a number of these, and I don't think that's the hard part. But then the best example, let's use the example of the attack. So Israelis see that there is overwhelming Palestinian support for the 7th of October attack. And by the way, that's after it happened. So before it happened, there was very little support in Gaza, for example, for another war. But after it happened, most people support it. But what is it they're supporting is completely different to what Israelis think they are. So most Palestinians don't believe that resistance fighters killed children, or
rape
unarmed
women,
civilian, or
whatever
rape
we
women.
saw. Yeah,
Exactly. That's just that's not a thing that you would get a meaningful percentage of Palestinians supporting. It wouldn't be zero, just like it wouldn't be zero on the Israeli side. There is a percentage that have that level of hatred, and yeah, there exists a faction on both sides, either because of what they've lived through, or in some cases because of ideological beliefs, that have like no moral qualms about this stuff. But they are absolutely in the minority, and there's a reason that Hamas published videos when the attack occurred, dozens of videos of their fighters standing in front of elderly women and people inside of these kibbutzes, and saying, we're not going to harm them, we're fulfilling the covenant of the prophet, we don't hurt the elderly, women and children, even if like the next Telegram video was the exact opposite. And those videos aren't aimed at the Israeli public, they're aimed at us. Like, these are videos in Arabic that are predominantly going to be consumed by Palestinians, and maybe the broader Arab world. So that alone should tell you that we care about being the good guys. We care about how, like, it's not that like Palestinians are these monstrous animals that are like happy when a child dies. Yeah. And what people are supporting is very different to what Israelis think they are. Yeah, I think that massively changes how you perceive the other side.
What would you say, like, many Israelis would react to that by saying, like, yeah, maybe the polls aren't a good indicator, but like in a lot of the videos we saw of the bodies being taken back, you see like crowds and crowds of Gazans like celebrating. Like, would you say that's also not representative, or is it?
No, I think that is. I think that is representative. I think that is representative, but I don't think the crowds knew. I don't think they knew what they were celebrating.
Let's talk about a specific image, because I think it will be harder it would be easier to say yes.
I'm talking. Maybe Adar can get it up.
I'm talking about, for example, off the top of my head, the image of the woman in the truck with the broken leg, where a mob.
Shani Luke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, I've seen a lot of those images, so I'm not sure if I'm talking about the exact same one. But like, for example, if you open the Telegram, you can join them. I don't know if it's legal to in Israel or whatever. If you open any of the Telegrams, whenever there would be a photo of a dead woman, there would be a caption underneath saying she was a soldier.
Right. That's
now, I don't know whether she is or isn't. In fact, I'm pretty sure in this case she wasn't. But
no, she wasn't.
Yeah, that is how it is portrayed. It is ultimately like, it is ultimately going to absolutely make people, like, for obvious reasons, there's a sense of like, yes, we finally, hit back at the oppressor, so to speak. So it is characteristic that people supported and were happy when, the Qassam fighters killed Israeli soldiers. And I would even say that Palestinians are pretty ambivalent about the deaths of civilians, specifically men. So, like, that's just an honest answer. Most Palestinians are like not going to be particularly upset when an Israeli man is shot, particularly of like fighting age kind of thing. And I think that's probably true on the Israeli side. too. Maybe it's higher on the Palestinian side. I don't know.
For the most part.
Yeah, and also the term civilian is deeply muddied, where basically, like, because settlers are armed in the West Bank, and because there is conscription in Israel, generally speaking, people perceive that like a much larger portion of Israelis than they actually are not civilians. But when you start talking about women, children, and the elderly, that's when you lose people. Like that's when most people lose their support for killing. And you can see this in like there was a terror attack in Tel Aviv this year. I think it was someone from the Lion's Den, right? Where he shot at people, and then when like he saw a group of women, it was like an old woman and a few people, he waved them past, and then he kept attacking. Generally speaking, most people don't the overwhelming majority don't support killing kids or the elderly.
Yeah, so
Which
this is
isn't,
actually,
I don't think that should be surprising, but maybe it is after the 7th of October.
it actually is very surprising for Israelis. And this is actually something I only learned in Mohammed. This I learned from you last time we had you on the stream, that you said civilians weren't targeted, and I was surprised that you thought that, because we saw that civilians were targeted, and there's been so much. There's been two things, right? So I literally have no way to say this without getting people upset, but here we go. On one hand, there's a disgusting level of atrocity denialism, right? There's people saying that all civilians killed were killed by the IDF, and only soldiers were killed by Hamas, and just not even calling it a question. Like they say, even the videos of civilians being killed, those are fabricated, right? So that's on one side. On the other side, you have this, call it atrocity, exaggeration almost. And again, I want to make it clear that an atrocity occurred on October 7th. And regardless of if it's exaggerated or not, it's still reason to be deeply pained, traumatized, and wanting something to be done about it. But generally, you see the narrative online, and it says children were beheaded, that they were like intentionally targeted, mass rapes, and it seems as we're seeing that there's more and more testimonies of rape as time goes on. But what it seems like happened as we get more information, Hamas, they're not dumb. They didn't want this to be bad PR for them. It seems like the directive they had was to kill soldiers and get as many hostages as possible, not to kill children. And we actually see this if you look at the numbers of children killed compared to adults. There's been, I think there were 20 to 30 children killed. It's also possible some of those were killed in friendly fire or based Hannibal protocol, or in tank fire in Beirut, which again, you can make the case that even if they were killed in friendly fire, that's still Hamas's responsibility. I think there's a case to be made there. But Hamas didn't want the bad PR. They didn't have much to gain from targeting children or for engaging in mass rape. They wanted a strategic win here, and that is in the form of killing soldiers and getting as many hostages as possible. What it seems happened that most of the worst atrocities was actually done by regular Gazans who took advantage of the situation because they didn't have the same directive. Right? Hamas was told to target a certain people. Civilians then came in and started,
and specifically the most that's always going to be the most insane crowd. Like if you think about, it's kind of the equivalent of settler violence.
Taking advantage of that situation. And I'm not going to say Hamas didn't go against whatever directive they had, because soldiers don't always listen to their directive. Like even in the West Bank, like in the IDF, people are surprised by this, but they're very careful. They tell you that you need to do your most to reduce harm to Palestinians. For example, if you're guarding and someone's approaching you, you yell for them to stop. If they don't stop, you yell for them to stop again. If they don't stop, you shoot in the air. They don't stop, I believe it's another warning shot, and only then do you shoot at their leg, right? This is what they teach you in the military, reduce harm. Some soldiers will not go through that process and shoot straight away, and sometimes not even at the leg. And we see this happens. So it's very well may be the case that Hamas militants did this. And this doesn't mean in any way making a defense for Hamas, just trying to be honest about what an effective strategy is. What do they have to gain from the world thinking that they're ISIS? No, they're trying to be legitimized in the international community, and they're trying to have some kind of military gain without reputational harm.
Can I ask something?
I'm not sure.
Or saying that I'm completely changing reality, but I'm very happy for you to tell me and make the case that I'm not reporting
I
it
think
based on
where
available to us currently.
I think what you might be mistaken if you think about it strategically. Think back to the idea that they wanted to prevent the Saudi deal, like by maximizing the atrocities, they maximized the reaction by Israel in order to put the Saudi deal off. So I'm not even sure, even if we put ourselves in their shoes and think strategically, the greater the level of the atrocity, it would be better for them strategically, because that provokes a greater reaction by Israel. And if we think the primary goal of the attack was to put off the Saudi deal, that would make sense.
I don't
Okay,
think
I think that's
it's
actually
geopolitics.
I think that's a fair counter, but if we look at it, they're doing an awful lot to make themselves seem like they're, very humane and the good guys. Like, and also, I don't think. Could you imagine if no children were killed and there was no rape? And again, one thing I think Israel's done wrong is that literally all the claims of atrocities, they're not bringing in like third-party investigators for this. They're literally like there's
Why the foreign journalists?
Yeah, but let's just talk about the rape, for example. And if I were to conclude, I would say most likely rape occurred, and I think it probably occurred by Gazan civilians, and I think it occurred at the festival. I think that's a prime area where there's even it's logical that something like that would happen. But all we're seeing, the only evidence of rape is testimonials that you're hearing from Israeli sources, so Israeli military. So if you are anti-Israel and you think that Israel can't be trusted, how are you going to be convinced by those testimonies? And what we see happening, we're saying there's no evidence of rape because the only evidence that Israel's putting out is the Israeli military and Israeli police saying we have testimonies. Instead of bringing in, and here's the thing, there is no clear agreed upon protocol at what you do during war to prove that rape occurred, right? It's not like there's some standard that they're not following. There's a lack of standard, and this is a problem. But I think it would be much more convincing if they were to bring in, international criminal court or the Red Cross to verify, forensics teams, right? The videos that you're seeing. They're sending to reporters, and I've seen hours of the footage. There you can see a brutality in the massacre. You're not seeing there. The videos don't show evidence of rape. They show that civilians were massacred, right? And I think anybody denying that at this point, there's no case to deny that because there's ample video evidence of this. But a lot of the worst atrocities like beheadings and rape and children being targeted, there's the only word of that happening comes from Israeli sources. And how can we expect people who are anti-Israel to believe that, So that's where I think.
Well, I mean, by this logic, we could deny, like, certainly most Holocaust massacres that took place before. I'm not like accusing you of anything, but like the vast majority of massacres that took place before the camps are based on testimonies, and we have minimal footage. Holocaust in general, like most historical evidence in general of atrocities is testimonies or orders from the perpetrators. So
I generally find testimony to be, I mean, given enough testimonies, I generally would take that to be sufficient.
I agree, but it's like the testimony isn't happening from civilians to the public. The testimony is happening from civilians to the Israeli military or to the Israeli police, and the police or military reporting on it, right? So I'm like,
no, I think there are direct like quotes of testimonies on some of the websites that like map everything out.
I'm familiar with two, with two direct ones.
But direct quotes without names, or I just want to.
There's one with a name, and it's a commando. She's not a civilian. But I don't know if that I don't know how much that changes for people. I know that certainly on the Palestinian side, people are not going to believe in an IDF like an IDF
Right,
commander.
exactly.
So, yeah.
So I think they're not. And
Look,
I
I
want to
think
I want to be clear again. Like I think the atrocity denialism is horrible, but I think Israel is going about it the wrong way if they actually want to prove the extent of the atrocities.
That one's a harder
I
one to
think
prove, though. The rape one is harder to prove. It's a harder bar. And
Well,
were the
there's
victims the ones that had passed? This is a tough subject, but were the victims of that assault the ones that died and were shot? Because I've seen one where, I hate to talk about it, but she was supposedly shot after the act was done to her. Is that the testimonies we're talking about, or are these people who are still alive and have testimonies?
no,
no,
I
these are
think
witnesses.
well, there's witness. No, is it only witnesses, or are they saying that the everyone who
I don't
was
know if
raped
there were any
was killed?
survivors. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
think on the PR point, like the people who are denying it at this point are not really going to be convinced by anything.
I don't
at least
agree.
in-
I think the bar is actually really low to convince people. It's just the information that's presented before them. I don't think it changes that much for a lot of people whether it did or didn't happen. So it would
Yeah,
change
that's
maybe the source. Maybe like at the end of the day, there's a certain bar of bad things happening. Where from that point onwards, it's purely emotive, right? Like, you know, if you know, if your kids are killed, that has already kind of piqued your moral calculus about an event. From that point onwards, all you're really doing is an emotive reaction. So I don't. Yes, there are people who will never be convinced. That is absolutely true. I think as time passes, that will change. So as after the war, people will be more open to hearing a narrative of events, especially if there is an attempt at sort of like making it more and more third party verified. Like for example, I think most people would like believe 5 testimonies, but they're not exposed to that. I remember, and this may have changed since I last looked it up, but I remember struggling to find it. I found a few, and that already altered my perception. That all it took was like 2 people talking about it. Before I was
Right.
like, okay, yeah. But I do think what Adar said also is how most people perceive it, which is, and I think there's decent amount of evidence that was the case, which is that the fighters themselves were the worst atrocities or the worst acts that are on video. I've watched every Telegram video, I think, so far of the attack. And the worst things I saw were perpetrated by quote unquote civilians. Now, it's also worth noting who those civilians are. So, like, the portion of your population that's willing to cross a border into a place they know is going to eventually, like, they're likely to die eventually, are going to be the most, extreme, most traumatized, most. This is the equivalent of like settler violence in the West Bank, where armies, the more discipline a group has, the less there tends to be atrocities, right? Or I don't know if I want to say that, but
depends.
Yeah, it depends on orders and kind of the organization. But like, certainly given absolute free reign, you already have enough with no like punishment or basically just like a willingness to die. You're going to have the kind of people who are going to cross over are going to be the most unhinged, basically. So yeah, no, I don't know. I genuinely don't have a certainty about any of this. That's
real quick. I just want to put this out there because I do see Sparkle in the comments saying that you saw a page with testimony from attendees of the festival, and it sounds like you're saying that there are sources, there is evidence that doesn't come from Israel. Can you please share that with me? And I'll, the importance of it is as such. I'm constantly correcting people's misinformation on Twitter, and I still, when people say there's no evidence of rape, I'm not responding. And it's not that I don't believe rape occurred. I think there's an extremely high likelihood that it did. And I don't know what the word mass amounts, but I think it did happen, and primarily at the festival. But the reason I'm not responding is because I can't share Israel saying something as proof. Like we just need to understand that's not compelling evidence. So if anybody has evidence that is actually compelling, that doesn't come from the Israeli military, Israeli police, please share it with me, because that is going to help me, correct people's misinformation. And I think it is one of the most horrific things that happened on October 7th. But again, we need sources that aren't IDF or police.
So here, when you're watching the videos, how are you differentiating between Hamas members and civilians?
A mixture of factors. So they're generally, not always, but generally they're in uniform. The Hamas fighters. The other thing is the videos the fighters publish themselves. So there's a few kinds of videos. There's the produced, edited videos that Hamas published, which are clearly like fairly produced. There's a watermark, blah blah blah. Then there's the stuff that like individual people filmed on GoPros, etc. Generally, like the kind of equipment they have, the degree to which they're armed. So the video with the shovels and the Thai worker, like those are almost certainly civilians. Like those are almost certainly not fighters. They aren't armed in a meaningful way. The way they're dressed, etc. So, and it's also just like so different to the videos of the fighters who are, most of which are in uniform. Yes, they do sometimes operate in civilian clothing, but even then they're heavily armed. So yeah, that's generally how I'm distinguishing it. That's not, none of this is definitive. This is all speculative, and it frankly doesn't change that much. Like, I mean, I think it's good for people to one day have a very reliable and like accurate version of events, but it doesn't really change my politics or kind of what I think should happen. Yeah, the only thing that would be like if I believed that the leadership, the political leadership of the organization specifically ordered atrocities to occur, because then I would think they were more irrational. That would, yeah, it's not a moral calculus, because the moral calculus is the same. You can assign the exact same moral weight to the action and full responsibility. So it doesn't really change the moral calculus. It's a question of like, if you're conducting diplomacy or you're negotiating with someone, if you think that they're fundamentally irrational, then that changes things. But that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think on the point that Adar mentioned of like soldiers disobeying orders, like that may be valid, but particularly when comparing with the IDF, I think I once heard that Hamas like operate under a fatwa given by, I think, Sheikh Qardawi, who effectively ruled that because Israel is a conscript society, there's no such thing as an Israeli civilian, and that everyone is a legitimate target. I think I've got that right.
I think you're correct about that. Yes.
So,
but that doesn't mean that still doesn't include kids. That still doesn't include the elderly.
But women and men of fighting age.
As I understand it, and I've seen a video of this, and this has been relayed by like there's a lot of people in Hamas, so I think it's not impossible, but it's unlikely that there's like one set of orders and a different set of orders. Mohammed gave clear orders not to kill women, children, and the elderly. He didn't say don't kill civilians. That's what he said. Like those were his words. Now, is it possible that there was like a separate set of orders given to an individual battalion to not do that? Maybe. Even so, what Or mentioned, the paper instructions which were published by the IDF, assuming those instructions are legitimate, they still didn't say what you're saying they did. I've read it. It's in Arabic. I don't even know if it's real, but it just says like kill any resistance you encounter. Just like kill anybody you encounter at these locations. That wouldn't change my perspective that they were under clear instructions not to kill kids, for example.
Yeah, regarding the rape, I think that document contained the transliteration of saying take off your trousers in Hebrew, but the imperative was turid, like male. So rather than telling a female to take off her trousers. So that was another thing that some people were debating.
Yeah, I personally think there's a near, again, I'm happy to see evidence to the contrary, but I think there's a near 0% chance that Hamas fighters who are very religious, generally speaking, were ordered to kill kids.
Right.
It's more likely that not. I even think, generally speaking, like they put effort into producing videos that said otherwise. So it's clear that they have at least a propaganda incentive to be portrayed as more humane relative to Israel, or at least in line with religious, doctrine about what is acceptable in war. In practice, it's possible that on the ground the commanders broke rank. In practice, they may have done very little to enforce that. In practice, they may be indifferent. In practice, a whole bunch of things may differ from that. But that's the publicly stated policy. And I don't know, the Israelis should be familiar with these arguments, because it's the exact arguments that Israelis say in response to what Palestinians say, criticizing their actions, where we say, you meant to kill, you meant to kill kids, or we'll point to a soldier's testimony about, bombing a residential building because he's angry, or we'll point to a video of a soldier torturing or beating a Palestinian, and the Israeli response is that's against the command structure, the official command structure from the army. And then our response is, well, they're still morally responsible, because you're still morally responsible for the actions of your soldiers, even if it goes against your command structure. You have to condemn it. You have to actively punish it. And however many you let go free, or if the punishment isn't severe enough, then you are responsible for it. And that's sort of the idea.
Yeah, and I mean, in that context, I brought up the fatwa. Like, if you compare that, there's no such thing as an Israeli civilian, to what Adar described is the IDF protocol. Whether or not it's a bait, I think there is a difference. Not to paint the Israelis as saints, but I still think there's a difference.
I mean, sure, yes, there is a difference, but of course there is. That is the nature of militant groups or terrorism or whatever, or guerrilla warfare. Yes, Hamas does not use the same tactics as Israel. They target civilians. That is part of there's no question that they do that, and that's part of their military doctrine. They have a different definition of civilians, but again, a fatwa saying that you can kill, because Israel is a conscription society, you can kill, people of fighting age, is still different to, you can kill kids who are clearly not ever going to be considered. Which does not exist. It should be clear.
I think that there was also examples of them making an effort to maintain this narrative, because in one of the Palestinian Telegram groups, there's a video of an old woman being taken hostage, and it was uploaded, and then very shortly after it was deleted. Right? Why would it be deleted? It's because they didn't want to make it seem like old people were targeted. So I think there was an effort to maintain this narrative, and that's what's been reported on Gazan media television, that it was only militants targeted.
But wouldn't the kidnapping of kids and old people kind of go contrary to that?
The Hamas claim is also that those hostages. Now, I don't know if this is true. I haven't looked at every single video to verify this. I remember paying attention to the violence. I didn't pay as much attention to who took which hostages. But the Hamas claim is that most of those hostages were people the civilians brought back on their motorcycles. And you can see at least that some of this is true. So the elderly hostage was definitely brought back by civilians. But I don't know if it's true of all the children. But that is the claim. The claim is that basically those were not the hostages that that was not what they were after.
I think I've seen somewhere where it said that the incentive was $10,000 in an apartment to get for every hostage.
There's an IDF interrogation video.
That's where I got it from. Yeah.
So, guys, real quick, I need to hop off in 10 just because I have a work call. So we're going to continue this on Discord. I want to give everybody an opportunity to just share a final thought before we hop off. And guys, I'm dropping a link. Wait, somebody said the Discord link isn't working, so let's get a new link. We haven't done an after party in Discord in quite some time. So you join the link, and then on the left-hand side, you'll see lounge. You could join. Michaela is asking, are we saying that we don't believe IDF sources, or that we don't think IDF sources are useful because of their perceived lack of credibility? So my take on it is, I personally, they're definitely not perceived. They don't have a perceived, they're not perceived as like a credible source of information. But I personally don't believe Israeli sources. I think if we look at the history and the incentives, both Hamas and Israel have a history of lying, specifically during conflict, and they have an incentive to do so. So when we're fighting, it's not just a fight over like military gain; it's also one of narratives. So there's an incentive to make things up, release intel that you think is going to support your case. And again, if we really look at the history of the conflict, you'll see many instances where Israel or the IDF said something without any basis, or it's later to be proven untrue. So that's why I think there needs to be a more standardized protocol where third parties come in to verify. The reason with that, though, I am very confident that rape occurred. First of all, that they're saying now that there's something like 500 or so testimonials, but also a lot of it is just based on logic. So in many instances, like one of the cases against rape is that rape occurs during war, but not in like a blitz attack like that when you don't have time. Normally it happens in more prolonged instances of war. But this is not a typical like blitz attack. You had a situation where many hundreds of civilians entered. Often rape is actually opportunistic. And when you have a population of people that on one hand are sexually repressed, on the other hand, have a lot of hate towards a group, and then have an opportunity to, engage in that act, they're opportunistically going to take it, especially if they're at a festival where they see a lot of women wearing revealing clothing. I think this is a prime situation where we're going to see instances of rape. So it shouldn't be hard. Put testimonials aside. It shouldn't be hard to like believe that it's likely to happen, and then take into account the testimonials that are coming out. That's why I say with high confidence that rape occurred. But I will say with that the evidence that most of the testimonials are just being put out by Israel, and I think that's not as convincing. I did see in the comment sections or saying there are many Israeli NGOs that are now talking about it. And Sparklelove said there's videos which are direct civilian testimonials to the public. I think that is very compelling. But that's kind of my take on information. So if Israel says something or Hamas says something,
is this the first time this has happened?
It should be taken with it should all be taken with a grain of salt, and we need a better system where independent third parties can come in and verify crimes, war crimes. I think it's very important, and I don't think we have that standard down.
So, in terms of,
and with that, we'll now go around, and everyone can have a final thought. Let's just go from top down. So, Mohammed, you want to share some final thoughts? Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm with you, but I lost you something. I lost you sometimes. Could you ask again?
Yeah, just if you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up.
I want to still talking with us to make something official, not just something just online, just exchange thought. Could we make something official inside Israel or inside Palestine? To make some program, to make some institution, to make something working on this. I can collect supporter from here.
Of what? Of talks between Israelis and Palestinians?
Yes, and making something for negotiating the issues and every problem of everything between us to make it better. Make some negotiation about cases, about something like this, to work on solving it. To prevent anything in the future to repeat again.
I don't know what kind of official thing we could do. But
You know, there is Yalla. Yalla, if you know Yalla about, it's a program related with the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem. We work together. We work as Israelis and Palestinians to in some programs about citizenship as as something as journalist citizenship. If you remember Adar, I met Adar in this program. This is something for entrepreneurship. We can work together in stay working on these programs, on but maybe making other cases, real cases, to negotiate together to make something press on our governments to or our two sides to prevent making something bad as what happened in Gaza. Uh, to make some programs, something shared together, maybe economy, maybe social cases. I don't focus now on any field, but maybe we work. We can make it together.
Yeah, we do need more programs like Yala. Although I think right now with the current situation going on, people won't even want to enroll in something like that. You know, I'm actually trying to do this. Hold on, let me drop a link to Yala's Instagram. It's an awesome organization. But I think now, you know, people are so pained that they're not even like
I know.
I think it's a tough time to even engage in this stuff. Although, you know, here we are doing it, but I'm trying to set up this. There's this company called Seek Healing. They do these like communication workshops, and they're willing to volunteer one of their workshops to do a group of Israelis, a group of Palestinians, and then a dual group. So if anybody actually wants to participate in this, please reach out because I'm looking for um, I'm looking for more people to be involved. And I just dropped a link to Yala. But I agree, Mohammed. That's how you and I met, right? So they're successfully connecting people on both sides of the border. So yeah, let's guys. I do need to hop off, but if everyone, Ali, feel free to share some final thoughts.
No,
Uh,
thank
just wanted
you
to
guys
thank
very
you.
much for letting me listen in. I'm not best for you. I hope you safety, you and your family. Same for you, Adar, and brother Watermelon. I forgot your name. Actually, all of you guys that are in Israel and Palestine, I wish you guys the best. This is the first time we get in the West. We get so much media, especially on our feeds. It's rare that I get to hear two people from the opposite sides talking. It's good to see humans in the actual on the ground. At the end of the day, we're all humans, so it's good to see each other as humans and be able to talk. So thank you for letting me just be a fly on the wall.
It was great having you, brother.
I just
Thank
want
you.
to say something quick. I think in Israel and in other countries in the Middle East, we have a lot of frontiers inside. So people, even though they're neighbors, they don't really get to talk to each other. I think it's very important to know your neighbors. So, and thank you for what you're doing, and I hope we'll be able to do this in the future, even though now this war makes it really very difficult for everyone, I know. And that's it, really. We don't really know our neighbors, and like sometimes you live and for Israelis you live next to Palestinians, but you don't really know them, and we have this in in other countries in the Middle East as well. We have exactly the same problem. So it's something I hope that we'll have the opportunity to work on together, and for normal people to interact with each other. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. Zahir.
My turn.
Yeah.
The summary I give is just like the narrative that has been portrayed since the start of the war. I mean, we spent a bit of this conversation talking about basically war crimes. I think there's a constant in order to galvanize the war effort and sort of get public backing behind it. There's a fixation on that. And like, I think you'd find that there are many pathways to holding people accountable and getting justice for those who committed war crimes that aren't this. But I don't see enough pushback in Israeli society right now, maybe understandably, I don't know, as to like, where is the end goal here? What's the off-ramp? What is the exit strategy? Because nothing about what is happening in Gaza is going to result in anything other than more death. And like, the Bibi Netanyahu pitch behind all of this is we control how high the fire goes. And we've had 15 plus years of the status quo, and this is what it's resulted in. And more of the status quo is going to result in exactly the same. There is not going to be a military solution to a ideological problem. So long as the Palestinian population is oppressed and has no pathway to change other than this, then the cycle of violence is only going to lead to more extreme violence. The occupation of Palestinian territories is always going to face resistance, and an attempt to achieve regime change this way is just going to see a insurgency for however long it takes to until there is a government that people actually support. So yeah, I know people should hold politicians and hold these people to account as to what exactly is your off-ramp here. I mean, everything about what Bibi Netanyahu is saying points to the fact that for him, this war is about trying to save his own ass. Everything he's been saying to his internal party members, to me, it seems like his strategy here is the only way he sees out of this is to be able to walk out of this with some great victory. And I don't think that is going to be a great victory for the people who actually live in the land. I think that's going to be a great victory for Bibi and pretty much nobody else. Nothing about what's been pitched to me looks like a vision for a better future. It looks like a vision for how we can have change. All that has happened is 15,000 plus people have lost their lives. The World Health Organization thinks that more people may die of disease and the conditions in Gaza than the total deaths we've seen from the military campaign so far. There is nothing logical or rational about the government's response, in my view, and the only way that there's going to be some sense in what they do is if people hold them to account as to where are you taking us here, like where are you trying to go. There's enough there's enough zealot voices talking about the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, or I forgot which whether it was an MK or a cabinet member talking about the deteriorating humanitarian Gaza crisis in Gaza being a good thing. That from the perspective of Palestinians and everybody watching this is a deliberate genocide, a deliberate ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Now, if the Israeli electorate and the Israeli people don't see it that way, then they need to hold their government to account as to what exactly is it that you're trying to do here, because all we see is killing, and is the death of predominantly civilian deaths, and then no achievable or logical military outcome. This is not how I've never seen regime change achieved this way in any country in recent history. So I don't know why people believe it. I understand that there's like anger and trauma, and people aren't thinking rationally. But it's there's been some time, and I'm hoping that like reason starts to kick in, because this isn't the way forwards.
Thank you, Zahir. Yoav, and then Connor. And Connor, you haven't said anything yet, so this will be your high-end buy, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Particular thanks to Mohammed and Zahir. It's really great to have you. Look, I think in the immediate term, we can't really expect anything else from the Israelis. I think the vast majority of societies would react this way, if not in a more forceful manner. Regarding the regime change, I think many Jews would look at World War II and the Nazis, which started militarily, but on the ideological front, preceded by decades of denazification. But I generally agree that there isn't a military solution to an ideological problem. And Zahir, back when you were on the Discord, I remember we would talk a lot, and you planted the seed in my understanding that the Palestinian struggle is very much tribal and connected to particular towns, and is about returning to people's ancestral towns and reclaiming all of Palestine. And for some reason, it took October 7th for me to truly, fully accept that the Palestinian struggle is about reclaiming everything. And I don't even say that critically. I can fully understand it. And so I think in the long term, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that changing. And maybe the only way is some kind of creative solution that, as we talked about before, somehow fulfills that aspiration, even though it seems totally impossible for the Israeli. But yeah, I've kind of realized that Palestine is as dear to Palestinians as like Judaism is for Jews. It's just something that you will not give up on, no matter how much you suffer. Even if it means that you'll have a high quality of life. Like, Jews could have easily converted to Christianity in the 15th century, improved their quality of life. They decided to stay with Judaism, and even if it meant so much suffering. And I've begun to realize that Palestine, the entirety of Palestine, from the river to the sea, is that dear to Palestinians. And unless the goal is like somehow indoctrinating them out of that, which I think is quite insane, any solution will somehow have to fulfill that aspiration. I have no idea what it is, but I'm beginning to think there is no solution that doesn't fulfill that. Yeah.
I'll try to keep it under 30 seconds, just because I know we have to head. But I'm glad that idea has been communicated by me. I know that the Germany analogy is what Israelis are thinking of, because I've seen it in Israeli newspapers, and it's just such a bad analogy. Like, I think Israelis think that Palestinians are brainwashed into what they believe, when, as you said, like, it is an intrinsic part of our identity. It's literally in our family names, our clan names. Everybody knows what village they're from. Everybody knows what their the history is. For the vast majority of people, it defines who they are, and then they live it. Then they live the war, and that validates the belief in the animosity and sort of adversarial nature of the other side. No amount of a shift in education is going to change that. This is like as rooted in someone's identity as as you sort of mentioned. Judaism is for Jewish people. They can be secular, they could be conservative, religious, but most people kind of share this idea. And frankly, it tends to be people who are not from those places that are the most open to partition, because then if I'm from the West Bank, I'm more okay with a two-state solution because I get to stay in my land. That area covers it for me. But if you're a Gazan from Ascalon, you want to return there. I think understanding what people really want and then beginning a conversation there as to, well, then what is an outcome here that isn't zero sum is more useful than trying to pretend that doesn't exist. I hope that happens. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Connor, what's up?
I'm mostly here just to listen and learn, but I really appreciate you, Adar, for what you're doing. I think this is incredibly important. And Mohammed, I hope you're safe. I hope you're healthy. And I just really appreciate hearing from everyone else here. And I'm excited for another call-in show, another opportunity to learn more. I just hope everyone's safe and healthy and staying positive, even in regards to everything going on.
Thank you so much, Connor, Mohammed, Zahir, Yoav, everyone else who called in, and all the viewers. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Again, just an opportunity for Israelis, Palestinians, and their supporters to be on a call together and engage respectfully. It's not something that's easy to find. So I appreciate everybody who's contributed to this. And as I mentioned earlier, if anybody wants to support the show to help us grow what we're doing, you could find ways to do that in the description. We should have another stream sometime next week. Unclear what it will be, but there will be something. I am going to drop a link to the Discord in the chat. Whoever wants to continue for an after party, click on Discord. On the left-hand side, it says lounge, and then join the lounge. Danny, you're asking how you could reach me. You can find my contact information in the description, and I'm going to drop my handle to both Twitter and Instagram if you want to reach out there. Again, thank you all so much. Sending you all love.